By the third morning, sickness had reached every street in Willow Bend. Families nailed blankets over their doors while the church bell counted the dead. Dr. James Rowan had medicine for pain, but nothing that stopped the spreading illness. Then he noticed one strange pattern among the names filling his black ledger. No household using Eliza Hale's rough brown soap had reported a single case. 6 months earlier, townspeople had laughed whenever smoke rose from Eliza's greasy iron kettle. Now those same people crowded outside her shed, begging for whatever remained inside. Eliza counted 32 finished bars and looked at nearly 200 frightened faces. Soap could not cure the sick, and she knew that better than anyone. However, it might decide how many healthy people became sick before sundown. The story began during a hard March wind in western Kansas in 1879. Willow Bend stood between a cattle trail, a shallow river, and miles of open grass. The town had a church, a schoolhouse, 2 saloons, and 1 dependable water pump. Eliza lived beyond the last stable with her 10-year-old son, Ben, and 3 hens. Her husband had died the previous winter after a freight wagon overturned near Dodge City. He left her a narrow cabin, an empty smokehouse, and $26 of debt. Eliza earned coins washing shirts, blankets, and blood-stained clothes for cattle crews. The work cracked her hands and filled her cabin with the smell of strangers. Store soap cost too much, and the cheapest bars disappeared twice as fast. One windy afternoon, Eliza opened the smokehouse and studied the waste around her. A barrel beside the stove held hardwood ashes saved through the entire winter. Behind the butcher shop, buckets of unwanted animal fat attracted dogs and flies. Her mother had once turned those same worthless things into something every family needed. Eliza still remembered the ash hopper standing behind her childhood home in Missouri. Rainwater passed through packed ashes and emerged below as dangerous, biting lye. Her mother handled that liquid slowly because one careless splash could burn skin. Mixed carefully with clean rendered fat, the harsh liquid changed into useful soap. Eliza had watched the process for years, but she had never controlled it alone. Need made the old memory feel less like knowledge and more like an invitation. She carried a dented bucket to Grady's butcher shop before changing her mind. Tom Grady stood behind the building, throwing pale scraps into a refuse pit. He stared at Eliza's bucket and asked whether she had started feeding wolves. "I want the cleanest fat you throw away," she answered without lowering her eyes. Tom laughed, but he filled the bucket because disposal already cost him time. "Take all you want," he said. "Just boil it downwind from town." Ben helped his mother build a stone fire pit behind the abandoned smokehouse. They hung Daniel's old wash kettle from an iron tripod above the flames. Eliza trimmed away spoiled pieces before melting the usable fat over low heat. The first afternoon smelled bad enough to send their hens beneath the porch. Smoke drifted toward town, carrying a greasy odor through every open doorway. 2 boys followed the smell and found Ben skimming impurities from the kettle. "Your mother is cooking candle soup," one boy shouted before running away laughing. By evening, Willow Bend had given Eliza a new name, the Ash Widow. Ben pretended the name did not hurt, but he stopped visiting the schoolyard. Eliza considered abandoning the kettle until she saw his shirt soaking beside the basin. Grease, dust, and dried blood still marked the cloth after ordinary washing. She touched the remaining $11 beneath her mattress and returned outside. The first batch failed before the mixture ever reached the wooden molds. Eliza's lye was too weak, leaving greasy liquid floating beneath a crust. She stirred until midnight, but the kettle refused to become soap. At dawn, Tom Grady found the ruined mixture cooling behind the smokehouse. "That looks expensive," he said, "especially when proper soap already exists." Eliza asked whether he had brought more fat or only another opinion. Tom left the bucket and carried the story back to every customer. Nolan Briggs heard it while arranging bright imported soap inside his general store. His wrapped bars smelled of roses and cost 25 cents each. Nolan displayed them beside the register where customers could admire their clean white edges. He also held Eliza's debt for flour, lamp oil, and Daniel's burial box. When Eliza entered for salt, Nolan placed 1 perfumed bar before her. "Soap should smell clean," he said, "not like something pulled from a carcass." Eliza turned the white bar over and saw a crack beneath its paper. "Clean is what soap does," she answered. "Perfume is what merchants sell." Nolan smiled because her debt gave him patience that kindness never had. "Your payment is due before summer," he reminded her as she reached the door. Eliza returned home carrying salt, humiliation, and one useful doubt about her lie. She broke apart the ash hopper and found rain had entered through a warped lid. Damp ashes had weakened the liquid before it ever touched the fat. Ben carried fresh hardwood ashes from the church stove and blacksmith's forge. Eliza rebuilt the hopper beneath a sloping roof and packed each layer firmly. She tested the new liquid using the careful method her mother had taught. The liquid was finally strong enough, and Eliza treated it with proper respect. Her second batch thickened slowly until the paddle left a trail across its surface. She poured the mixture into shallow wooden boxes lined with clean cloth. Ben covered the molds with blankets while spring rain tapped the smokehouse roof. The next morning, Eliza uncovered a pale brown slab firm enough to cut. Hope lasted until she washed one hand beneath the yard pump. The soap bit her skin and left a red patch across her wrist. Ben reached for the bar, but Eliza knocked it away before he touched it. The lie was strong enough, but her balance was dangerously wrong. Eliza carried every bar outside and buried them beneath the refuse pit. 2 failures had consumed most of her ashes, fat, salt, and remaining confidence. That evening, Ben found her folding Daniel's coat into a trader's sack. "Are we leaving?" he asked, while watching her smooth the worn sleeves. Eliza looked toward the smokehouse and could not answer him honestly. A knock interrupted them before silence became an answer neither wanted. Dr. James Rowan stood outside, holding the ruined bar Eliza had discarded. He had treated the burn on Tom Grady's hand earlier that afternoon. Tom mentioned Eliza's soap while complaining about his own injured skin. James examined the bar's crumbly edge and smelled the sharp surface carefully. "This batch is unsafe," he said. "That does not mean the idea is foolish." Eliza asked why a doctor cared about soap made behind a smokehouse. James opened his medical case and showed her 2 stained cakes from Eastern hospitals. Some physicians had started washing between patients, though many still considered it unnecessary. James had noticed fewer infected wounds whenever he cleaned his hands and instruments first. He could not explain everything, but the pattern had become difficult to ignore. Eliza admitted her mother had judged mixtures by touch, smell, and long experience. Those memories were useful, but they were not measurements Eliza could repeat. James suggested changing one thing at a time and recording every result. Eliza opened Daniel's unused freight ledger and wrote down her first failed batch. She recorded the ash condition, fat weight, weather, cooking time, and skin reaction. The second failure looked less like humiliation once it became information on paper. James traded a small scale for laundry service through the end of summer. Before leaving, he placed Daniel's coat back across the chair. "Do not sell warmth tonight because one kettle embarrassed you," he said. Eliza studied the ledger long after the doctor's lantern disappeared down the road. The third batch began with less pride and far more careful preparation. She cleaned the fat twice and weighed each portion before lighting the fire. Ben marked the kettle handle so every batch held the same amount. Eliza added the lye slowly while keeping her face away from the steam. She stirred until the mixture folded over itself like thick cream. This time she saved a small portion before pouring the wooden molds. She tested that portion only after it had rested for several days. The soap produced a modest foam and left no burning redness behind. Eliza washed one of Daniel's old work shirts beside the yard pump. Grease loosened from the fabric, turning the basin water cloudy within seconds. Ben held the clean sleeve towards sunlight and searched for the missing stain. "It worked," he whispered, almost afraid the words might change the cloth. Eliza touched the faded cuff and felt Daniel's absence settle differently. His coat could remain on the chair, and his ledger could begin another purpose. Behind the smokehouse, the first safe bars waited quietly beneath their blankets. Eliza cut the slab into 24 uneven bars and stamped each with a spoon. The soap looked plain, smelled faintly of smoke, and cleaned better than expected. Her first customer was Margaret Cole, who ran the boarding house beside the livery stable. Margaret needed sheets cleaned after a cattle crew stayed 3 muddy nights. Eliza washed half with store soap and half with her own brown bars. The homemade soap cleared grease faster and required less scrubbing from tired hands. Margaret bought 4 bars, then hid them beneath linen before visitors noticed. She trusted the soap, but she was not ready to defend it publicly. Tom Grady became the second customer after infection reddened his butchered knuckle. James cleaned the cut and ordered Tom to wash before changing the bandage. Nolan's perfumed bars stung the wound and cracked apart beside the basin. Tom bought Eliza's soap while insisting the purchase meant nothing about quality. "It is cheaper than losing a hand," he muttered without meeting her eyes. Eliza accepted his coin and reminded him that clean bandages mattered too. Within a week, the redness around Tom's knuckle stopped spreading up his wrist. The soap had not healed him, but cleaner care gave his body a chance. James understood that difference, even when the town preferred simpler explanations. Soon, people claimed the Ash Widow had made a bar that cured wounds. Eliza corrected the story whenever she heard it, which disappointed almost everyone. "Soap removes dirt," she said. "Your flesh still has to mend itself." Honest words traveled slowly, while the rumor reached farms beyond the river. Orders grew anyway because laundry workers cared more about results than mystery. Eliza added pine needles to one batch and sage leaves to another. The plants softened the smoke smell without hiding what the soap actually was. Ben wrapped finished bars in brown paper cut from empty flour sacks. He drew a small ash tree on each package using a broken pencil. The simple mark gave their rough product something neither expected: a recognizable face. Nolan noticed those packages appearing beside wash basins across Willow Bend. Every brown bar sold meant one white bar remained untouched in his display. He responded by lowering his price and placing rose samples near the doorway. Customers admired the perfume, but working families still counted every coin carefully. Eliza charged half his price and accepted clean ashes or fat as partial payment. Her trade turned household waste into something useful before money changed hands. Nolan called that arrangement begging disguised as business whenever customers could hear him. Eliza answered by delivering 6 bars to the schoolhouse without charging anything. Teacher Anna Reed placed one beside the drinking pail and one near the privy. The children disliked washing until Ben showed them how ash tree bubbles climbed their fingers. Even the boys who mocked his mother competed to produce the largest foam. That small victory ended when a May dust storm damaged the smokehouse roof. Wind lifted 2 boards and drove dirt across every uncovered mold inside. Eliza lost 3 weeks of work before discovering the contamination beneath the blankets. She could have scraped the surfaces and sold the bars to careless buyers. Instead, she marked the entire batch unsafe and used it only for floors. The decision left her $7 short when Nolan's payment deadline arrived. Nolan visited at sunset, carrying the debt paper inside his polished leather case. He walked through the repaired smokehouse and counted every empty drying shelf. "Sell me your recipe," he offered. "I will erase the entire debt." Eliza asked whether he planned to keep buying fat from Tom Grady. Nolan said Eastern factories could make cleaner soap without covering town in smoke. He wanted her ash tree mark, her customers, and the story behind both. The recipe itself mattered less than removing a competitor before she became stronger. Eliza looked toward Ben, who was repairing flour sack wrappers beside the door. "The debt will be paid with soap," she said. "The recipe stays here." Nolan granted 1 additional month because taking her cabin would attract public anger. Before leaving, he warned that pride spoiled faster than animal fat in summer. Eliza watched his wagon disappear and wondered whether refusing had protected Ben or endangered him. The next morning, Margaret Cole arrived with 12 boarding house sheets and 20 pounds of ashes. Tom followed with clean fat wrapped in canvas instead of dumped inside a bucket. Anna brought older students who repaired the smokehouse roof during their Saturday lessons. James purchased 8 bars for his medical case and paid the full asking price. None called their help charity because each carried work Eliza could return. Before July ended, Nolan received every dollar written beside her name. Eliza kept the stamped debt paper above the kettle where steam curled its edges. She had proven the brown bars could support 2 people through an ordinary summer. Willow Bend had not yet seen what they could mean during an extraordinary week. Would you have trusted Eliza's rough soap after watching her first 2 batches fail? Share your answer below and subscribe to Wild West Lifestyle before her greatest test begins. Late August brought heat that pressed over Willow Bend without releasing after sunset. The river shrank between muddy banks while the town pump worked longer each morning. Cattle crews arrived dusty, thirsty, and eager to spend wages before riding south. Nolan filled barrels beside the pump and sold water to camps beyond town. Each wagon left muddy tracks around the well and deeper ruts near the privy. One evening, Thunder broke the heat and rain hammered Willow Bend for hours. Water rushed through the street, carrying stable waste toward the lowest ground. The town pump stood exactly where every brown current gathered before reaching the river. Eliza watched cloudy water collect around its wooden platform the following morning. She filled a jar and saw tiny, dark particles turning beneath the sunlight. The water smelled faintly of the stable despite looking clearer by noon. James listened carefully when Eliza carried the jar into his office. He could not see the danger itself, but he understood where filth traveled. Together they asked Mayor Walter Price to close the pump until the ground dried. Walter refused because the nearest alternative spring stood nearly 2 miles uphill. Closing the pump would halt boarding houses, saloons, livestock pens, and Nolan's water wagons. Nolan called the jar ordinary mud stirred by an unusually heavy storm. He poured himself a cup from the pump and drank before the gathered council. "Fear can poison a town faster than water," he said, wiping his mouth. Walter ordered the platform cleaned, but allowed the pump to remain open. Eliza left the meeting carrying the untouched jar and a growing sense of dread. She walked directly to Anna Reed and removed the school's drinking pail. Every cup for the children would now come from boiled spring water. Anna agreed after seeing the sediment gathered along the jar's bottom. Margaret began boiling boarding house water and washing kitchen cloths with Eliza's soap. Tom scrubbed his cutting table before sunrise and again after every cattle delivery. James washed between patients while urging families to clean hands before preparing food. Most households ignored him because clear water still looked harmless inside their cups. The first patient arrived at James's office 2 evenings after the rain. A cattle driver staggered inside with terrible cramps, fever, and dangerous weakness. By midnight, 3 men from his camp were lying on boarding house floors. Margaret moved them into one room and barred other guests from entering. James treated their weakness with boiled water, broth, rest, and constant attention. Eliza washed their sheets outside, keeping dirty water far from the spring. She burned cloths too fouled to clean safely and boiled everything reusable. Before dawn, a cook from Nolan's saloon developed the same violent illness. Then 2 sisters living beside the pump became sick within the same hour. James opened his black ledger and marked every patient's home on a town map. Nearly every mark surrounded the pump or followed water delivered from it. The pattern became clear before anyone understood how quickly it would grow. At sunrise, James rang the church bell and ordered the central pump closed. Nolan arrived with Walter and demanded authority neither man possessed during an emergency. James placed the patient map across a barrel and pointed to its dark circle. "Call it cholera or flux," he said. "The water is carrying death." Walter looked toward families already gathering with empty buckets and frightened children. Closing the pump meant hauling every cup from the distant hillside spring. Leaving it open meant pretending the growing list of patients was coincidence. The mayor removed the pump handle and carried it into the church. Nolan watched his profitable water wagons become useless before breakfast. His anger lasted until a boy ran from the store calling his name. Nolan's wife, Grace, had collapsed beside the kitchen table after drinking morning coffee. James followed him inside while Eliza carried soap, clean cloth, and boiled water. The sickness had crossed Nolan's polished doorway, and argument no longer mattered. Grace lay trembling while James checked her pulse and listened to her breathing. Eliza cleared dirty dishes, opened a window, and moved clean water beside the bed. She ordered Nolan to wash before touching his wife or carrying anything downstairs. Nolan stared at the brown bar resting beside his expensive porcelain basin. "Will this save her?" he asked with none of his usual confidence. "No," Eliza answered. "It may help keep her sickness from reaching you." James looked up from the bedside and told Nolan to follow every instruction. Eliza's honesty frightened him more than any promise of a miracle could. She returned to the smokehouse and counted 91 properly rested bars. Another unfinished batch filled 2 molds, but those bars were not yet ready. Ben helped load the finished soap onto their handcart before the church bell stopped. They found nearly 100 people waiting beside the locked town pump. Some wanted water, while others demanded medicine James did not possess. Eliza climbed onto the pump platform and held one brown bar above the crowd. "This is not medicine," she said. "It is one wall against spreading sickness." She named the other walls plainly: boiled water, clean hands, separated waste, and patience. Fear made people listen to instructions they had mocked during healthier days. Walter divided the town into groups for water hauling, cooking, washing, and nursing. Margaret offered her boarding house kitchen for boiling water throughout the day. Anna turned the schoolhouse into a clean shelter for families without illness. The church became a sick ward because its windows opened on both sides. Tom carried meat outside town and scrubbed his cutting room from floor to ceiling. Ben handed one soap bar to each household while recording every family name. The ash tree packages disappeared from his cart faster than he could count them. Nolan opened his store and placed every imported soap bar beside Eliza's remaining stock. He removed the price cards without waiting for anyone to notice the gesture. Rose perfume and wood smoke finally rested together without competing for a customer. By evening, organized work had replaced the frightened crowd around the pump. Wagons hauled spring water, while children carried boiled bottles between marked houses. Families tied yellow cloth outside sick homes and white cloth outside healthy ones. Eliza placed wash basins at every doorway and assigned separate cloths to each room. James moved constantly between beds until exhaustion made his hands tremble. The first night brought 7 new patients, despite every measure taken that afternoon. 2 had already carried the sickness before the pump handle was removed. Their arrival convinced some families that washing and boiled water had failed. Panic returned faster than the wagons could climb from the hillside spring. One man broke the church lock and tried reinstalling the central pump handle. He claimed thirst would kill the town before invisible filth ever could. Nolan stopped him by standing between the man and the exposed pump shaft. "My wife drank from here," Nolan said. "Nobody else will repeat that mistake." The man lowered his wrench while waiting buckets rattled behind him. At dawn, another problem appeared inside the supposedly clean water wagons. Eliza smelled one barrel and recognized the same stable odor from her jar. The haulers had reused barrels filled from the contaminated pump before its closure. Fresh spring water had entered wooden containers that were never properly cleaned. Walter ordered every barrel emptied, but the decision erased half their morning supply. Eliza scrubbed the barrels with hot water and her strongest laundry soap. Tom rinsed them at the ravine, safely downhill from the spring. Ben painted an ash tree on every barrel approved for clean water. The mark once used for cheap soap became the town's sign for safety. By the third morning, Eliza had only 32 finished bars remaining. Nearly 200 frightened residents crowded outside the smokehouse before sunrise. That was the moment James had seen forming inside his black ledger. Households using the washing rules remained mostly untouched, while ignored warnings became new marks. Soap had not cured anyone, but clean habits were slowing the illness between homes. Eliza divided each remaining bar in half to extend the supply. The unfinished molds could clean floors, but their harshness made them unsafe for skin. A fresh batch would require more time than frightened families believed they had. Tom delivered every usable piece of clean fat from his cold room. The church emptied its ash box, and families brought ashes from distant farm stoves. Eliza rebuilt the fire while Ben checked Daniel's ledger against each measured portion. They could work quickly, but they could not force the mixture to become safe. Heat shimmered above the kettle as Eliza stirred through the hottest afternoon. Fatigue made her misread one mark and add too little clean fat. The finished test portion bit her wrist exactly like the dangerous second batch. Ben saw the redness and looked toward the waiting crowd beyond the fence. "They need it now," he said, though his voice carried no accusation. Eliza stared at the full kettle and understood what desperation was asking her to risk. Unsafe soap could injure hands already weakened by work, heat, and fear. She marked the batch for laundry and refused to distribute it for washing skin. Angry voices rose outside when Ben announced another delay before usable bars arrived. Nolan entered the smokehouse carrying his final case of white imported soap. He had once hidden that case to protect prices during cattle season. Now he set it beside the kettle and handed Eliza the iron key. "Use everything," he said. "The store can survive an empty shelf." Eliza searched his face for the merchant who had mocked her greasy smoke. She found only a tired husband waiting for news from the church. Together they cut the white bars smaller and wrapped them beside the brown halves. Ben distributed both kinds without explaining which had once cost more. That evening, James collapsed beside Grace's bed after working nearly 3 days without sleep. Eliza caught his medical case before it struck the floor and scattered everything. His pulse remained steady, and no stomach sickness had appeared yet. Exhaustion had taken the doctor before disease could, leaving the ward without direction. James gripped Eliza's sleeve and pointed toward the patient map across the room. "Keep new cases separate," he whispered. "Do not let fear mix the rooms." Eliza placed him on a cot and carried his ledger into the church aisle. She was no physician, and she refused to pretend the ledger made her one. However, she understood clean cloth, separated water, careful hands, and repeated work. Anna managed the healthy shelter, while Margaret supervised food from the clean kitchen. Tom hauled waste downhill, and Walter guarded the closed pump through the night. Nolan remained beside Grace, washing his hands until his knuckles cracked and bled. Eliza gave him tallow salve and reminded him that broken skin also needed protection. Before dawn, Grace opened her eyes and asked why roses filled the room. Nolan laughed once, then lowered his head against her clean blanket. The fourth morning brought 3 new patients instead of the previous day's 11. The fifth morning brought 1, an older farmer who had hidden his symptoms. On the 6th morning, James opened his ledger and found no new names. Willow Bend had lost people, and no honest ending could erase those empty chairs. Yet the spreading sickness had slowed before it consumed the entire town. James credited clean water, separated waste, washed hands, boiled cloth, and cooperation. Townspeople preferred crediting Eliza because one hero felt simpler than many changed habits. She corrected them from the church steps while holding her last brown half-bar. "This did not defeat sickness alone," she said. "You stopped carrying sickness to each other." The crowd looked at the small bar and finally understood why honesty mattered. Nolan rebuilt the store display after Grace recovered enough to walk downstairs. White perfumed bars returned to one shelf, while Eliza's brown bars filled another. He placed both at the same height and removed the insulting price sign forever. Walter ordered a new well dug uphill, safely beyond the stable drainage. Anna kept wash basins at the schoolhouse after every yellow cloth disappeared. Tom built a covered fat bin and delivered its cleanest scraps every Friday. Margaret stopped hiding Eliza's soap whenever important guests entered the boarding house. Ben returned to school carrying ash tree packages for every shared wash basin. No boy called his mother the Ash Widow when those packages reached the desks. Years later, Willow Bend still collected hardwood ashes inside barrels beside the church. New families sometimes asked why valuable space was reserved for ordinary stove waste. Older residents remembered the week when worthless ashes helped protect an entire town. Eliza never sold a miracle because she had built something more dependable than one. She made soap, told the truth, and taught frightened people how to protect one another. Would you have trusted Eliza before the sickness came? Rate her story from 0 to 10. Share where you are watching from, and subscribe to Wild West Lifestyle for more frontier stories.